Welcome to Popcorn and Patriarchy.
Where movie magic meets the slightly tragic.
That's great.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Popcorn and Patriarchy. I'm your host, Esme Michaela. I'm an actor, producer and founder of Evulve Productions, and this is my co-host.
Hello, I'm Joe Coates. I'm an actor and creator.
Before we jump into today's episode, we'd like to thank our main sponsor, Switchboard LGBT+, who do amazing work for the well-being of the queer community. I'll talk a bit more about Switchboard LGBT+, and the amazing work they do later on in the episode. Popcorn and Patriarchy is Evulve's brand new podcast, born out of a karaoke session on my birthday last year. This podcast is released bi-weekly, structured as companion episodes that combine film critique discussion with creative participation. The first episode of each month explores a film through an intersectionally feminist lens. Joe will then be set a creative challenge inspired by the film.
Can't wait.
In the second episode of the month, we will review the creative challenge and discuss the process of working with various art forms. Joining us for today's episode is Tash Walker, a queer historian, podcaster and author whose work explores LGBTQ+ history and culture with honesty, insight and a real passion for storytelling. Tash is also the creator of the podcast Queer AF, which highlights powerful voices. You're not?
That's not
You're
me.
not?
No.
Okay, so sorry.
Okay.
I know that Tash is also the creator of the logbooks. Which I personally love. I'm a massive fan of the logbooks, and that's how I found Tash's work at the beginning, when I first became a fan.
Not that much of a fan though.
Well, I didn't write the intro, and I thought, oh, maybe there's something that I've missed.
Yeah, we'll blame that on Nathan.
Today we'll be talking about their work, their journey, and the importance of preserving and sharing queer history. Tash, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
So I'd love to hear a bit. So obviously our film today is Pride 2014. I'd love to hear a bit about just your work with queer history, and how you got into it. I know you've done loads now. You've got the podcast. You've also got your book that's just come out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. So how did things all start? Well, I started as a Switchboard volunteer in 2012. And then in 2014, one day when I was on a shift, I started looking into places that I shouldn't be, cupboards and crawl spaces. And in there, I found some boxes. And they were these really tatty boxes that were water stained, completely covered in dust. And as I was looking through them, I started to pull out these brilliant pictures, black and white photos of volunteers in the 80s, meeting minutes, like sexy HIV prevention posters. And then I pulled out this A4 book and it said logbook on it. And I had no idea what this was. And I opened up the logbook and literally out of it fell all of these pages onto my lap. The spine was completely disintegrated.
Wow.
Because it was so old. And I looked down at my lap and I started to look at what I was reading. And I realised that the logbooks were a written record of the calls that volunteers had taken the moments after they'd put down the phone. And they go from 1974 to 2003. So I worked with the board at Switchboard to move the archive to Bishopsgate Institute. And then I spent 2 years reading them. And it was an absolute roller coaster ride. And I guess that was sort of how I got into queer history, if you like, from a very sort of grassroots community lens. And then spent a lot of time researching, interviewing people who had called Switchboard or who had volunteered or who just have lived memories of being LGBTQ+ throughout those years. And out of that grew the podcast, The Logbooks, with my collaborator, Adam, who I met almost 7 years ago, one very wet and cold LGBT History Month evening at Bishopsgate Institute, where I was presenting my findings. And yeah, all of these years later, we've just released a book of the same name, The Logbooks, Voices of Queer Britain and the Helpline That Listened. And it's a wild thing to have something out there in the world. But yeah, the work that we do and continue to do, whether that's through writing or making like documentary podcasts or recording people's stories is about putting those stories into reframing history, right? That it is about, we are interested in people who chain themselves to railings, and also the kings and queens, and some of those kings are also queens. But it's also about centering the everyday stories of people who just lived as themselves. So I'm really passionate about that, about the idea of us as living archives and capturing the stories that just are gossip, and thinking about how this kind of history has been told before, and trying to recenter it, to write a book saying it actually does belong in a book, I think.
I love that. Like it's was down on paper already, but it's worthy enough to be down on paper in a book properly.
Yeah.
That's something I loved about the podcast, the Logbooks podcast, was like there were some stories that were really powerful and like a massive moment in someone's life, and some stories that were just like
Little things.
Just little things. Like, so our first film is called Love Wins, and it's about queer history over the past 100 years. And it was obviously did a lot of research to find true stories from each decade. And then when I found the logbooks, I was like,
Goldmine.
I was like, listen to it for hours a day. Like, I was absolutely hooked. If our listeners wanted to either find you or the Logbooks podcast, or to read the book, where would they find that?
Yes. Okay. So the Logbooks podcast it's called the Logbooks. So that is under that name wherever you get your podcast. We've just reopened it for seasons 1 to 3. We're going through the actual call records chronologically from 1974 to 2003. Then we took a break, wrote a book, and now season 4 is little 20-minute interviews of some of the people that we've interviewed, and we're actually about to start a season 5 in April, which is going to be bigger and better, and you'll have to wait for what that will be late, in a couple of months or so. But it's made by mine and Adam's production company, which is called Aunt Nell, which means listen in Polari, which is an old queer language. And so, the Logbooks, you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. And the book, it's out with Faber, so you can find it wherever, it's in all good bookshops. I would recommend going to, an independent bookshop or a queer bookshop. If you're in London, Gaze the Word is amazing. Or bookshop.org, because they donate some of their profit to independent bookshops as well. But any good bookshop should have it. And if they don't, ask for it.
If they don't, they're not a good bookshop. Exactly.
Yeah.
And we'll tell them that. That's so cool. Awesome. I love that kind of stuff, those little stories from the past, because you realize that people haven't changed. The only thing that's changed is the attitude around these kind of things. These people were exactly the same as us. They were just fighting different kinds of people, like, different problems at the time.
That's why we made Love Wins. Like, queer has always been here. It just shows up in different ways depending on what society is corner it's putting us into,
I think that's what the film is kind of all about.
For Pride,
I mean, it's crazy to think, like, watching Pride was like, how much has changed is kind of incredible. Like, there's still such a long way to go, but the difference in 30 odd years is 30, 40 years is crazy.
Yeah.
How just tiny attitudes have changed in general places is it's big.
So this is your first time watching Pride, isn't
first
it?
time.
Was it your first time watching Pride, Tash?
No, I watched it when it came out. I think I went to like one of the screenings that were happening. So it's my second time watching it. I hadn't watched it since, and actually, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but I was quite struck by the change in how I felt watching it now in 2026 versus when it was originally out, like over 10 years ago.
What was that? We can talk about it now. Like, what was the change that you felt?
So, I mean, I remember watching it for the first time and thinking, okay, this is great. This is, lesbians and gays support the minors. It's a really important story. I know these people, like, I know Mike Jackson, I know Jonathan Blake, and it's lovely to see their stories being captured in this way and told with so much passion and pride, and not just in the name. And then what struck me, I watched it last night, was how somehow so much more relevant it felt to what's happening today. I think in 2014, or when it first came out, when I watched it, we were living in such a different world and time, and where we are right now, I'm watching, this film that's talking about something that happened in the mid 80s. We're talking about workers' strikes, we're talking about austerity, we're talking about queer people, police brutality, protests, being horrific things happening within protests, and then also under the stark attitude of someone like Margaret Thatcher. And one of the things that I found in writing the book was one day I think I turned the radio on, and I was struck by how I thought I was writing a history book, and suddenly it feels like it's 1987. And to watch Pride, which is about the years like 84 to 85, right, in the lead up to something that came in a bit later, like Section 28 in 1987, Thatcher brought that in, which was a piece of legislation that prohibited homosexuality from being spoken about within schools and local authorities. And to watch it in 2026, post the Supreme Court ruling of last year, to think about all of the union protests that are happening at the moment, the Palestine protests, the way that the government has been trying to control the rights of the everyday people. And looking back at that, I was really struck by it. And it's a story that I know really, really well. And it's one of solidarity, which is so important. But it felt like it hit a lot heavier somehow. And those scenes that I was watching last night on the television didn't feel too far away from the scenes that we're living. And I think that history tells us so much and teaches us so much. But just to think about the idea that, okay, people talk about history repeating itself, but you don't know history is repeating it if you don't know the history in the first place. And to watch a film teaching us this history around solidarity, collectivity, being the antidote to like social fascism and having that common enemy felt very powerful, much more powerful actually than when the first time I watched it.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, you watched it from a very different lens to myself, and that's really interesting to hear, because I didn't know. I knew a bit about the history and the miners' strikes and Thatcher and whatnot, but I didn't really know a lot about this specific story. So do you think I loved the film? I thought it was so feel good and happy and
I
wonderful.
Cried the whole way
Yeah. And like, I found it really joyful. But like the real story is that there's a lot of pain and struggle in there, and from someone who knows that history. And you said you knew some of the people it's portraying. Like how does the film? Like everything has to be dramatized to a degree and embellished and made a bit more engaging and at times, and sometimes the history is enough. But how would you find the film did at being close to the core material of the history?
I agree that you have to, when you're telling a story, you learn how to tell a story to make it as effective as possible, and there's a creativity to that. And I do that within my work as well. And people do it every day when we talk about our memories or we share something that's happened to us. I think that Pride it's very, very true to the history of what happened. They worked closely with the people who'd lived it. Obviously, there are elements of it which Bill Nye's character, I don't know if he ever existed or not, but it doesn't matter, because he's also gay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did.
Apparently this is real. The real Cliff Grist. That was my favourite scene in the entire film was when they're cutting sandwiches, and he's just mentions, "I'm gay," and she's like, "I know," and that's it. And that's it. I mean, there are people
so heartbreaking
because they're all so wonderfully repressed. But he found this moment to speak his truth, and she knows him that well. She knows him that well. She knew. But if he didn't want to bring it up, neither did she. I just thought it was so good. And then they just go back to cutting sandwiches. But yeah, apparently the real Cliff Grist was gay, due to some people's
memories of it.
Some people's memories.
That's interesting because then it changes it, doesn't it? Because it's the film in that moment. The film becomes about fighting for his rights as it is for the people who are down from London, and it's actually a really subtle change, but it reframes the whole piece that this is about a big the big solidarity
Exactly.
fight.
It's a good example of those smaller stories that we can really
Yeah.
relate to in the larger struggle. There's those tiny moments that
I think as well, like he was a real person, but that is such a just such a common thing, isn't it? Of like, I mean, still now around the world, even in the UK, people not feeling confident enough to live their lives as who they are. But like for me, so heartbreaking, because like I can't imagine having to live my whole life completely not who I am. It makes me feel very lucky that that me being out isn't as much of a brave thing to do as it was even just 40 years ago. I mean, even 30 years ago. Like
you said, Tash, a lot of the struggles are still going on, but in different ways. Like we're able to do this podcast and say how we feel, how we are, what kind of people we are, and how we fit into these stories. But there's something in them fighting the fight for us to then go on and continue the fight.
Yeah, totally. It was. I went to the Pits and Perverts anniversary ball, 40 years, in like 2024, which was great. And they did a big anniversary ball, and some of the miners came and gave speeches on the stage, which was amazing. Just to see them talking about the importance of what that time taught them and how we can use those learnings today when it comes to trans rights and, of course, wider queer rights, but specifically trans rights at the moment. One of the things that I did really enjoy, so Jonathan Blake, who was who's the character, who's number 2, diagnosed with HIV. Yeah. He is a real character in life as well. And there was a flamboyance that I just completely could have imagined Jonathan being that character. But it is really quite amazing to see these people who, and Mike Jackson, who's the one with the beanie and the glasses. Yeah. He met Mark at Switchboard. So they were both Switchboard volunteers, and that's where they met. And then they went on to do Lesbians and Gays Support the Miners. And I've spent, I interviewed Mike. I spent time with him, talking to him, and I've seen his scrawls in the logbooks.
Wow.
I heard the stories of him doing really naughty things, like defacing the religion file at Switchboard, and you get a real sense of his character that comes through, and in all of the stories that you hear from him. And of course, Mark died in 87. So there is always this sort of sadness that's held with this part of time, and just how many people were lost throughout it. What I thought was interesting in the film was that you saw the beginnings of the HIV and AIDS crisis sort of looming large, but it doesn't quite become the central point of the story. It's a subtlety of what was happening throughout that time. But it does give you pause for thought on really what they were fighting for, both the miners and the what they then called the lesbians and gays. They were fighting to live, weren't they? Both of them, and for their life. And to think that this was on the precipice of such a big wave of diagnoses around HIV and AIDS. Like the height of death was around 93, 94, and this was happening just before that started to sort of hit us. It just gives you real pause for thought around what you just don't know is on the horizon, but the importance of staying connected and united, I think, across that common enemy point. I just think it's so important, that solidarity piece, because we lose so much time and energy by not being united.
Yeah, I think that for me is one thing. Anytime talking about or thinking about or looking back on queer history, it's like to get through hard times like we're in now, like it is coming together, turning in on each other. It's like we're just forgetting what the enemy is or what the problem is. We're not each other's enemy. Like we are all just trying to live as we are.
And that's what the government was trying to do, mainly with those. It was propaganda pieces about AIDS. It was to turn people against each other rather than actually
advert
fighting
is
the
a
problem.
real advert,
The
by
advert
the
is a
way.
real advert. Apparently it came in later in 87.
It did, yeah.
Which is when,
It was,
as you were saying, it was all
yeah.
kicking off. But voiced by John Hurt, which is crazy. I had no idea. I had to go back and listen to it again. I was like, yep, that's John Hurt doing an AIDS awareness, and there's sort of this like glooming like song of death underneath it. It was really sobering.
That's something. So I first watched Pride in, I think, 2021. So not that long ago, but age-wise, early 20s to late 20s, I've got I see the world very differently. And something that I didn't understand the first time I watched it was, I don't know the actor's name, but he's a very famous actor now. But
Andrew Scott, is it? Andrew Scott?
Not Andrew Scott. You know the moment in the club where Mark is in the stairwell and he's just going into the club and then there's someone else leaving.
Yeah.
Yes.
Russell Tovey, yeah.
And he says like, oh, I'm doing my farewell tour. And it feels a bit sad. And I never really understood when I watched it before what that meant. But I remembered that scene. So I was waiting for that scene because it had always confused me. And then when I watched it this time, I think potentially just because I've gone on a journey of learning more about queer history in that time, or I'm a bit older, I was like, oh, he's on his farewell tour. Like, he's got a diagnosis. You know, the likelihood is he's going to die.
Yeah.
And like, so that for me really hit differently to when I first watched it. And then obviously as well then with Mark when he's in Wales and he's got his hood up and he's all
God,
dramatic.
I didn't pick up on that. So yeah,
Really?
I mean that's probably something I'll do when I next watch it. But well, yeah, that makes it a lot more real.
And it is so subtle because it's not the point of the film, but it is still.
Again, those
still
small stories,
something that
really
was
intricately made. Yeah,
was a big part of all of their lives. Like I've spoken to my mum about her remembering getting the AIDS leaflets through the door and feeling so scared, and because and then I think with then COVID and with It's a Sin coming out, I know we're not talking about It's a Sin, but when It's a Sin came out at the same time with COVID, I think that was like then also then looking back on a film like this or rewatching a film like this, I can understand that fear so differently now because of the fear of, you know, like I remember being on the train and watching a video of someone with COVID like dropping down on the floor, and I remember like looking around me like, oh my God, like I need to get home, I can't talk to anyone. So then you do understand how then you know those people in that tiny Welsh village are like, don't bring them here. Like we don't want it to infiltrate this bubble that we've got where there isn't any danger,
because there was no understanding of what this virus was at the time.
Makes it's like such a beautiful story, because when they do start coming together, and then when the guys are in the pub and they're just guys in their 20s that are just blokes, and they're like, oh well, I want to dance, I want to learn how to dance, I want to, you know, it's like, oh, you know, if they could come together in that situation.
Like, they're so begrudging at the start. It's like that one guy who comes up to shake his hand, and that's it, and then he goes back and it's like, right, I've done my bit for what they did to us, and then there's such a barrier there that then gets broken down. Two of the most unlikely groups of people working together for a common goal.
But I guess they're just humans, aren't they? And the thing is that the media plays a really important, horrific role in this, where they turn humans into characters and scapegoats and villains. And you've seen this throughout history in what should be called propaganda, you know, like in World War II, and then seeing it again within the HIV and AIDS crisis in the 80s, and seeing it with trans people today. There's a weight of responsibility not taken by the media around the way in which they control this, and the government as well playing into that. The leaflet that you're talking about, the AIDS Don't Die of Ignorance leaflet, went out on the 12th of January 1987, and it landed, like your mum remembers, in every household in the country. But that piece of that campaign, that public health campaign, also included the advert, which was like a tombstone, really, really scaremongering, and it was targeting people who were not at risk, so heterosexual, cisgendered, monogamous people. And it wasn't targeting men having sex with men, sex workers, intravenous drug users, and haemophiliacs, who were the ones at risk. And Switchboard's number was on that leaflet, and they found out the night before that it was on the leaflet, and they just said, okay, we'll just deal with it when it comes. And then the phone lines were completely overloaded, 200,000 calls coming in, so much so that the phone lines broke, and they had a real battle to get the phone lines fixed. There were only 5 phone lines, and 2 of them weren't working, and they were the 24 hours overloaded with phone calls. And the engineers, it was BT who were the providers. They were too afraid to come into Switchboard's building. They were too afraid to even touch the wires at the connector point down the end of the road, because they thought doing that would give them AIDS. And the reason they thought that is the same reason that we see in the film of people being afraid, is because of the media.
Propaganda,
yeah. So it's really interesting to think about the role that media plays and how that hasn't changed as well.
And we see it within the film with the news story when I can't remember the character's name. She's got the cute bob.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay, I'm going to take this to the press, and then suddenly they're like, okay, well now we're not going to accept any more, or we're going to accept money, but no more money, because now it's in the public eye. We can't be seen to have this association because it's in the media. Press is everything, and now it's also
what's
social.
the slogan they have? The perverts. They get labelled
Pits and
perverts.
perverts.
And then
they have the Pits and Perverts ball. Do you know if, in your research, I can find this, obviously it was at the Electric Ballroom. In the film, did they shoot it in the Electric Ballroom? Do you know? I haven't been to the Electric Ballroom for a long time. That's what I thought. I haven't been for over 10 years.
No, neither have I.
And I looked it up, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I found that the Gaze Word bookshop is the actual bookshop.
Yeah.
And then also another historical thing in the film is obviously Mark Wright's Switchboard's number on the wall, which was quite nice because obviously Switchboards are a sponsor, and I was like, oh, that's I'd forgotten that. From an art point of view, film wise, any thoughts?
My favourite scene, I said before, I love the sandwich scene. My favourite scenes were those little human moments obviously the story overarching is hugely important today, but like the bits that really captured me with those sort of human, like this Welsh community that are so isolated from they do become their own world, and it's like it was that feeling of like aliens basically coming into their world that they didn't understand, they didn't know about, and that them just gradually getting to know that these were just other people that were just like them, and they were all in it together for a common goal, and those were the bits that really, goosebumps.
Well, it is like Mark says, isn't it? We're going through the same thing. They've been, targeted by the government, targeted by the media.
Yeah, there was a bit of controversy about the breakout group, the lesbian breakout group. From what I heard, of just how it was portrayed in the film. There's like one scene where she talks about I can't remember the character's name. She's got braids. And she talks about the breakout group that they're forming, and she's like, I'm a feminist, I'm a lesbian, I'm a woman, and then one of the ladies playing bingo is like, I don't care who you are, don't talk during bingo, something like that, and that was kind of it.
Really cute.
It was I laughed at that bit, but also I think some people had an issue with the reason why they wanted to form a lesbian breakout is because there was this interesting topic, because people who were there have very different opinions and accounts on it, but there was a heavy male voice even in the LGSM, and I think as some of the women there recanted it as just a lot of yelling, and they didn't really get their voice in, which is interesting to see that aspect of it is still coming through, male dominance even in the LGSM, which I thought was interesting.
It's a good point. And the Gay Liberation Front, which is what they mention, there's some people who had been in that before. It's mentioned like at the beginning of it, was also, this was a predominantly macho and patriarchal period of time, and it was sexist, and there was sexism that was happening within the queer movement and within the gay liberation front. I know stories of women being at those meetings, being asked to make tea for people, just subtle stuff like that. And I think that when we're looking into history, when we're talking about history, it is really important to not glorify it, and not look back on it with rose-tinted glasses, and recognise lesbians and gays support the minors. The GLF did amazing work, but there would have definitely been sexist behaviours within it because it was in a sexist period of time. And what we know now around that is so vastly different. I'm sure that it was not at all accurate to how it was at that moment in time. There was also a really big separatist movement that was happening in the 80s, where many women, many lesbians were not interacting with men at all as a point, not living with men, not wanting to socialize with men. And so that would have been a very prominent piece of history that was happening alongside that period of time that lesbians and gays support the minors was coexisting. I've heard stories of separatist women, getting pregnant through artificial insemination and then finding out that they were going to have a boy and struggling with that. So there's a really complex piece of history that was happening alongside that when it comes to feminism too.
Yeah, that isn't, like you said, isn't
really shown in the film. I think there's that one scene of her getting shut down, and I think that's what some people had a problem with, that portrayal of it. But then I suppose apparently Mike Jackson had a different account of it when but
everyone remembers things differently. History
is written. We're trusting people, aren't we? So it's hard to know exactly what the truth is when we're getting.
I saw a play
recently,
accounts. and the whole overarching thing was memories are just stories.
Yeah.
And it is just like it's all just stories. And it just depends who the storyteller is, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, most of history is conflict, and conflict has sides, doesn't it? So. Yeah.
Well, that's the sort of historical way of looking at history, right? Is conflicts, and I think that a big piece of work that we need to do is how we capture those other kinds of stories and histories. And I think what part of the problem is when you're making a film, 40 or so years after the event, when it's a film that's about, or a piece of work, a piece of art about an oppressed community that has been written out and censored from the main historical narratives, you don't have first-person accounts of it. What you have are, in the time, what you have are people who are now in their 60s and 70s remembering something, and also the newspaper articles that were completely outrageous. And so to actually get a sense of what the reality was is really hard. And when you record our queer elders and listen to their stories, in the stories that they tell now, they would be vastly different to the stories that they told in the 80s when it happened, moments afterwards, because there's an element of survival that comes into them. And you can tell that. It's a beautiful way of storytelling, but it's also, we have to factor that into our consideration when we're listening to them. It's great. It's just a big old gossip, isn't it, really?
There has just been a documentary about it that's come out called Striking with Pride.
Is there?
Yeah.
Is it on BBC?
I don't know what it's on. That's not great. Would you be able to have a look, Ruby, to see what Striking with Pride's on? Thank you. But it's got 5 out of 5 on Letterboxd.
Cool.
And yeah, because I was just looking at like what parts were true. Predominantly what I found with my research is that most of the film is true as far as the story goes. It provided nearly 40 queer speaking roles in the film. I tried to look up how many of the cast were queer, because I know that a lot of the cast were also queer, but I could not find the exact
this is something I wanted to bring up, because I've had this debate with friends from drama school a lot of should you be casting queer people in queer roles. And I think it's an ongoing debate in the acting performing world at the moment. Is that sorts of play what you know and what you have lived experience from, which I completely understand. But then on the other side, do you have to expect someone to disclose their sexuality to the world? If you're an actor, you can't tell someone to tell everyone that they're gay.
Yeah.
If they're gay, if they're queer at all, you can't really expect them to do that. But you understand that you want someone with those lived experiences reliving those experiences for a piece of art. So it's an interesting debate, I think.
Yeah, I think it is. I think also depends on the character and then how the actor does it, because we see some roles, James Corden, you know, some straight actors playing queer actors very stereotypically, and you know, if the role could have had some more nuance, then we did also have in the Pride March at the end, there were some LGSM members as actors.
We're there.
In the 85 March,
Wow.
yeah, which is nice.
Fantastic.
Did you?
It's on Sky Documentaries and Now.
So you can find Striking with Pride on Sky Documentaries and Now.
Thank you, Ruby.
Thank you, Ruby.
Yes, give that a watch.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it because I definitely find I love watching true stories. I mean, especially with this, because of how it mirrors what's happening today, or how that's what I took from it anyway.
Yeah.
And obviously what Tash took from
Another
it.
thing I found really interesting was, again, we were talking about the inner conflict in the group before, is that when LGSM got underway, there was a lot more pushback from the gay and queer community than there was from the minors by the end of it.
Yeah, and we saw
Especially
moments of that
when
in
the
film.
AIDS crisis was picking up. Yeah, that they were. Yeah, you saw it when where Andrew Scott's character Agethin comes. He storms out to start collecting money by himself, and then someone shouts at him for, you know, there's a bigger problem
going on right now,
going on than the minors, and it is quite eye opening that they were not just like, they were almost seen as like traitoring against the because there was a whole thing about there's like one scene at the start when someone's like, why should we help the miners? I lived in a mining town and they used to beat me up going home from school every night. So there's a lot of vitriol going both ways from gays to that community as well.
Yeah, this is something that I feel like in society, when it's like if the oppressed group aren't perfect, if the full oppressed group aren't perfect, it's just another reason to then like drag on the oppressed group. And it's like, oh well, if you know, I'm not saying that's what you're saying.
No.
But
I
like,
was just
it's like,
interested
oh,
in the infighting.
if some queer people don't want to do it, then maybe it shouldn't be done. Or if some queer people think this isn't a worthy cause, then it shouldn't be done. And like we see it a lot in the media now of you know, one crime happens and it happened to be perpetrated by a queer person. So actually all, especially with trans people, actually all trans people are criminals or are wrong because there's, you know, there's been like one case where someone did a bad thing, you know.
Yeah, it's just prevalent. Go ahead, Tash. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that it works both ways. And the only way that we will ever move forward in society is if we take people on face value as individuals that are part of something bigger. And it is absolutely valid for a gay man who's in that scene in the film to say, they beat me up on the way to school and on the way home. I'm not doing that. And that's valid because that's part of their lived experience, and it would be traumatic for them. It's an individual choice as part of a collective to say, I mean, I do it. I'm going to sit here and have a conversation with someone who has transphobic views, and I'm going to challenge them. But you don't have to do that. That is my choice to put myself in that position and have a conversation, which I hope will move us forward. But it's a complex thing to do, and it takes a lot, and it has an impact on you. And Mark Ashton as an individual, as a character, is a very specific kind of person. And I think that people shouldn't be written out or shamed for not wanting to push back in that and build a connection with a community that's hurt them. I think it's fine, but I do think equally that we all need to learn to hold conversations and have conversations that make us feel uncomfortable, to move forward to something that feels a lot more like equality or equity. And if you can sit down with someone and listen to what they're saying and have them listen to you, then I think that does move us forward and it does change it. But that's not an easy thing to do. So yeah, it is really complicated. And I completely agree on your point around one person doing a bad thing. Well, that person is a predator, or they are someone
Yeah.
who is who's committed assault. That is one part of that character. Just because they are queer or trans, that's a completely separate thing. And what we love to do in society is to label and to put labels on people. And those labels can save us, don't get me wrong. But they also reduce the complexity of human nature down to one thing. And we're not that, are we? We're not a monolith. We are wonderful and multifaceted and full of so many things, which makes us complicated. But I also think, and I will stop because I'm sort of ranting, but I do think that one of the things that we need to do in the world is welcome mistakes. Like, I am very, very open to looking back at what I said a year ago or even yesterday that I now think is, oh my God, I shouldn't have said that. Well, that's great that I know that now, and I own it and I'll talk about it. And I'm interested in being challenged, because how else does society move forward? And I think we're so afraid, because of things like the media, of being taken down, that makes it harder for us to put our neck on the line a bit more. So I think it's a mix of all of the things that you're both saying.
Yeah, no, I'm not ranting at all. I love that.
Spot on.
We'd like to take a moment to thank this episode's sponsor, Switchboard LGBT+. For over 50 years, Switchboard has supported the LGBTQIA+ community through challenges and triumphs, offering a listening ear in difficult times and moments of joy. Their support is completely free and available wherever you feel most comfortable, whether that's via phone, web chat or email. Switchboard services are open from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. every single day of the year. Their trained volunteers are available to discuss anything related to sexuality and gender identity, whether it's sexual health, relationships, or just the way you're feeling. Their contact details can be found in the episode description or on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. So towards the end of the episode, we will answer a creative confidence hang-up. Were there any new ones in the drive, Ruby? I've got one here otherwise that I can use. So I've got one here that I think might relate to your work. So this is basically the Creative Hangup Hotline, where people can give us their hang-ups creatively, and we kind of talk about the creative process. So we have, how do you work through harder times to still produce creativity? So, you know, if you're working with a difficult story from history, or one that you find quite triggering, or you just, you know, you don't want to do it, like, how do you still then, you know, put pen to paper and still do that work?
It's really hard, actually. You know what? Like, it's so funny how these things can really impact you. We did an audiobook for the book as well, and when I was recording the audiobook, I was reading the words that I had written, that I had spent years researching, you know, listening to people tell me, and I was crying. And it, you know, that's 6 or so years since I started this project, and those words that I know so well still had such an emotional impact on me. And I think that it's important to just recognize that. Don't push it away, use it, channel it, because there's an emotional response that is relating to you that others will relate to as well. But I think that one of the things that I've really learned in this work is that you have to give yourself space to feel and process. And when you are part of a community, like the queer community that we're speaking about today, but it applies to others, where you don't know your histories, you don't know those stories, you were disconnected. When you're finding them, when you're learning about them, when you're trying to write them, you are going through a process of elation and connectivity and celebration. And it feels amazing. It's like a million amazing first dates. And then you have this moment where you realize you didn't have it. And in that moment, it's like this snap, and it's a grief. And you're feeling all of the absences that were not there, that all of the things that you could have achieved or you would have felt if you'd known. And that is a really complicated feeling, but it is an important feeling that is part of this story. It's part of this creativity is part of this work. And right now, I really feel like we're living in a moment, especially when it comes to queer storytelling, where artists, writers, actors, directors are making work that relates to this. And so much of that, I think, comes from the fact that we didn't have access to it because of things like Section 28. So my tip would be to feel it, let yourself feel it, and then let yourself have the space to recover, process what happened, and use that fire within you. You know, like with the work that I do, I feel there are moments that have been so hard, like in lockdown in 2020, Switchboard, I was the chair of Switchboard at the time, and we went remote. We took our first remote phone call ever, shut the phone room for the first time, and it was from a trans teenager who had been kicked out of home because their parents had just discovered that they were trans in lockdown, kicked out in lockdown. And I was reminded of this phone call that I had read from the logbooks from 1978 about a trans kid whose parents had just discovered that they were trans and had kicked them out. And I was really struck by the similarity in those calls and the continuity of it. But what drove me in that moment was not only sadness and the horror that this was still happening, but I suddenly had all of those stories. I knew that that person had reached out to Switchboard in 1978. I realised that they had reached out in 2020. And that fires me. That really gives me energy to do this kind of work, to keep these stories being told, to have them represented, because of how powerful it is to recognise yourself in art, in writing, in podcasts, in film. It's a connection between that kid in the 1978 and that kid in 2020. And if we build those connections, then we as a community are more connected, which really helps in the movement to fight for our rights. But also all of those stories then live on in us, and we don't feel alone. And it's this bigger movement. So, but it isn't for everyone. And it's okay to feel like, you know, you can't, those stories are too much. There are people who find it too hard, and that's valid. There's room for everyone within this. But I think care is really important to yourself, to be able to care for those stories as well in the right way.
Yeah, I love the use all the emotions. Like we're so taught that some emotions are bad emotions and some emotions are good emotions, and you should push down the bad ones. But it's so important
angry.
Get angry, like feel the feelings. I love the coming back to like your why as well. That's something I say within producing, when you have to maybe like rework a budget, or you have to cut bits of the story, or you just don't want to keep going with it because, you know, you've heard 50 no's and you still need to get that like last bit of money. It's like, always just know your why. Come back to your why, because if you always know your why of what you're doing, whether it's you're, you know, telling a story or you're working on a project, if you know your why, then you can keep going.
Exactly that. And that why will be individual to everyone, like you said, Tash. The reason you're doing it, it could just be therapeutic to you. You might not have the ambitions to make this reach everywhere, but just getting your feelings down in your work can do something for you, and that is enough. So, and even if you don't want to talk about it or tell anyone about it, that's fine as well. It's just about what you're doing for yourself more than anything.
Oh, thank you so much. That was amazing. So so amazing as well with the like the fact that you know some of the people in the film is just.
Can I just ask quickly, if when you met them, do you think the actors got them right from what you've seen?
Yeah, they're pretty good. Yeah. Jonathan is outrageous, an outrageous teen. And Mike Jackson is very gentle, very unassuming. Has round
apparently
glasses.
He does wear the beanie. Yeah,
He
apparently
does,
wore the beanie a lot. Yeah.
He's much smaller, but no, he's lovely. He told
I'm
me
not
an
sure there's a lot the
amazing
actor can do about that.
No.
Yeah. He's great. Definitely. It's great. And one of my friends was in it as well. Who like Faye Marseille, who plays the lesbian with the outrageous hair. So it's nice to see her in it too. Yeah, I think that they did a really great job, and to have people like, you know, Imelda Staunton and Bill Nighy and Dominic West as well. It's just like, it's great. It's great to see that cast, and also to see Russell Tovey, who has gone on to do, you know, massive and amazing things. And Andrew Scott,
And
it's brilliant.
I'm really bad with names. Jessica Gunning, Freddie Fox, like
Yes,
you know,
yeah,
they've
yeah.
since 2014, like their careers have, you know, gone an
Skyrocketed,
amazing
yeah.
trajectory. Yeah, so it was really cool seeing both the already goated cast and then the newly goated cast.
Yeah.
Is that using
The new
goated in the right way?
generation. Spot on.
I learned it a couple of
You're
weeks
so
ago.
current. No, yeah.
Well, thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Tash.
That was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for coming on and talking with us.
Yeah, all good.
Letterboxd. What would your Letterboxd review be?
I thought, okay, stars. I give it 4.5. 4. I'd say 4.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I'm quite particular with my 5-star films. I did really love it. I thought it was really impactful, really funny, really heartwarming.
I gave it 4.
Did you give it 4?
I gave it 4.
Yeah. Okay.
My main note, if we're thinking about it intersectionally, is that I understand that they're telling a true story.
Yeah.
But I think there could have been just more representation in like the casts of extras that are used, like in the clubs.
Yeah.
Like I was really trying to look out for, because I was aware that we were going to get a predominantly white lead cast, and even though it's representative within queer nature, I was looking out for non-white people and people of colour, and there were very few in the non-lead cast. And I understand lead cast, they want to be accurate, so I think that would be one of the things that brings it down for me.
Yeah, for sure. It was quite a low budget film from what I hear
Really?
at the time. Yeah, it didn't have a huge budget, and it seems like they did really well. Like they didn't always have the amount of extras that they wanted to. Like apparently there was a lot more police at the parades that they wanted to have, and like have that sense of like almost armifying the
expensive costumes.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, exactly. I would give it a 4 as well. I really liked it. It was really heartwarming, really funny at times, and really eye-opening. I just thought sometimes the dialogue got a little like the same. Some scenes they were saying sort of the same thing again, and I completely understand why, because it's the message of the film. But like, there were a lot of scenes that I think happened again, which didn't always build on what had already been done. And I thought I really like short films, because I think if you can do it in the minimum amount of time, then it's so concise and there's no added extra. And I thought maybe this film could have done with a little bit of a cut here and there, but other than that, yeah, loved it.
So you wanted the film to have some cuts, but you would also have liked them to represent the issues with the all I can think of is the word manosphere. With misogyny.
Yes.
You'd like them to include more of the misogyny issues, but still cut some time.
I think maybe. Yeah. I think that's possible.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, 4. I'll go with 4 too.
Yeah, I'm yet to officially put it on my letterbox, but for all my 5 followers, you look out for that.
We've got a Popcorn and Patriarchy letterboxd, which will be linked in the description. Yeah. And then we've also your creative challenge.
Oh, yes.
For next episode is to create a short scene or dialogue between 2 characters that wouldn't normally meet each other.
Okay.
I've got both of our bellies around.
Yeah, I know. I'm so hungry. These are going to be eaten.
Yeah.
Okay. A scene between 2 characters that wouldn't normally meet.
Yeah. Dialogue, duologue.
Great. Okay. Let's see what happens.
So that is a wrap for today's episode of Popcorn and Patriarchy. Before we go, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who makes this show possible. First off, our sponsor, Switchboard LGBT+. If you'd like to learn more about their work or access their services, their details are on the screen now, as well as in the episode description. I'd also like to thank our brilliant graphic designer, Bashful Cat, for all of the awesome artwork, Danny Shields for our fantastic intro and outro music, our partner, Middlesex University, who lets us lets us use their studio, our amazing student placements who keep everything running behind the scenes, and a special shout out to all of our Patreon supporters. Your support means the world to us and keeps us going.
Yeah.
And feel free to subscribe if you haven't yet.
And thanks to Tash.
Thanks to Tash. That was incredible.
Amazing.
Thank you, and we can't wait to catch you in the next episode.